The deep ocean, explained slowly. A calm drift through the Abyssal Zone. Segment 1. Introduction to the Abyssal Zone. Imagine yourself floating downward, deeper and deeper, through an endless expanse of water. The light begins to fade, slowly at first, then more dramatically, until darkness envelops you completely. You are descending into one of Earth's last great frontiers, a realm that covers more surface area than all the continents combined, yet remains largely unexplored and mysterious. This is the Abyssal Zone, the deep ocean's vast and ancient realm. The Abyssal Zone, also known as the Abyss, represents the seafloor and the water column of the ocean that extends from 3,000 to 6,500 meters in depth. To help you visualize this distance, 3,000 meters is approximately 9,842 feet. 6,500 meters reaches down to 21,325 feet below the surface. These measurements define a zone so far beneath the waves that conventional human exploration remains virtually impossible without specialized technology and extreme precautions. What defines this mysterious realm more than any measurement is the perpetual darkness that reigns throughout its expanse. Sunlight does not penetrate to these depths. No rays of golden light ever illuminate the bottom of this world. Instead, complete and utter blackness prevails, broken only by the bioluminescent glow of creatures specially adapted to survive in this lightless realm. This absence of sunlight is not merely an inconvenience, but rather a fundamental characteristic that shapes every aspect of life in the abyss, from the structure of animals' bodies to their hunting strategies and their very metabolisms. The Abyssal Zone covers an astonishing 83% of the ocean's total area. Let that figure settle in your mind for a moment. The vast majority of the ocean, the largest habitat on our planet, exists in this deep, dark, underexplored realm. Furthermore, the Abyssal Zone covers approximately 60% of Earth's entire surface. When you consider all the continents combined, all the mountains and plains and deserts and forests, the Abyssal Zone still covers more ground than all of those terrestrial features put together. It is quite literally the largest habitat on our planet. Temperatures in the Abyssal Zone maintain a consistent cold that would be deadly to most organisms. The typical range hovers between 0 and 4 degrees Celsius, or in Fahrenheit terms, between 32 and 39 degrees. These temperatures remain just above freezing throughout the year. The water at these depths is perpetually cold, a far cry from the warm tropical waters of the surface. This consistency is remarkable though. Unlike the surface ocean where temperatures fluctuate with seasons, the Abyssal Zone maintains an almost unwavering cold that allows specialized creatures to maintain stable physiologies. The pressure in the Abyssal Zone increases dramatically with depth, a phenomenon that becomes more intense the deeper you descend. At the deepest points of the Abyssal Zone, pressure reaches up to 750 atmospheres, which translates to approximately 76 megapascals. To contextualize this immense pressure, the pressure at sea level is merely 1 atmosphere. At a depth of 6,000 meters, the pressure is approximately 600 times greater than what you would experience standing on the surface of the Earth. This crushing weight would instantly kill an unprotected human, Yet creatures in the abyss have evolved remarkable adaptations that allow them not merely to survive, but to thrive under these extreme conditions. The Abyssal Zone is entirely aphotic, a scientific term meaning that no light reaches it whatsoever. Because photosynthesis requires light, it is impossible for plants or photosynthetic organisms to survive here. No kelp forests wave in these depths. No algae blooms occur on the abyssal plains. Instead, life in the abyss has evolved entirely different strategies for obtaining energy. This absence of photosynthesis creates a fundamental difference between the Abyssal Zone and virtually all other ecosystems on Earth. Oxygen levels in the Abyssal Zone are lower than they are in surface waters, yet they are not entirely absent. Life persists here, drawing on the oxygen that does exist. Most of this oxygen originates from melting polar ice and from deep water circulation patterns that slowly transport oxygen-rich water from the surface to these incredible depths. The journey that a water molecule takes from the polar ice melt to the Abyssal Zone takes thousands of years. It is a slow, ancient current that connects the frozen regions of our planet to the depths. The Abyssal Zone is rich in nutrient salts, particularly nitrogen, phosphorus, and silica. These nutrients are abundant due to the constant decomposition of organic matter that drifts down from the more productive layers above. Dead plankton, fecal matter, and decaying organisms create a slow but constant rain of organic material that provides the raw materials for life in the abyss. Though the food supply is sparse compared to surface ecosystems, nutrients are relatively concentrated in the abyssal water and sediments. The Abyssal Zone is home to remarkable communities of animals and microbes that have been shaped by millions of years of evolution to survive in conditions that would be instantly lethal to most Earth organisms. These creatures possess adaptations so specialized that they seem almost alien to those of us accustomed to life on the surface. Their bodies, their behaviors, their very chemistry has been refined by the selective pressures of the deep ocean to create some of the most unusual organisms on our planet. Segment 2. How the Abyss was formed. The story of the Abyssal Zone is a story written in stone and time, stretching back hundreds of millions of years. The formation of the abyssal plains beneath the abyss is an ongoing process that has been shaping the ocean floor since the days of the earliest oceans on Earth. The primary mechanism responsible for creating these vast, flat expanses is something called seafloor spreading, a process that occurs at the mid-ocean ridges that crisscross the planet's surface. Beneath the surface of the ocean, at the mid-ocean ridges, new oceanic crust is continuously being created through volcanic activity. Hot magma rises from the Earth's interior and cools as it meets the cold water, solidifying into new rock. This new crust is then pushed outward by tectonic forces, a process that moves at remarkably consistent rates measured in centimeters per year. Over millions of years, these small movements add up to the creation of entirely new sections of ocean floor. As the crust moves outward, older crust is pushed away from the ridge, slowly traveling toward the edges of the ocean basins. Abyssal plains are among the flattest regions on our entire planet. If you were to stand on one and look around, you would see an almost featureless landscape extending to the horizon, uninterrupted by mountains or valleys. This extraordinary flatness is the result of countless millennia of sediment accumulation. Fine particles of sediment settle slowly from the waters above, layer upon layer, creating a smooth carpet that covers the underlying rocky foundation. The depth of this sediment can reach several kilometers in some locations. The composition of sediments in the Abyssal Zone varies depending on the depth and location. In shallower abyssal regions, the sediments are composed of calcareous shells, the remains of tiny marine organisms that lived closer to the surface before sinking to the bottom. However, below 4,000 meters, something remarkable occurs. The pressure and temperature become so extreme that calcium carbonate, the mineral that makes up these shells, begins to dissolve. At these depths, the primary sediments are instead composed of brown clays and siliceous remains, which are more stable under the extreme conditions of the deep. While most of the Abyssal Zone consists of vast flat plains, this uniformity is interrupted in places by seamounts, which are underwater volcanoes rising from the abyssal plain. These seamounts were formed by volcanic activity, much like surface volcanoes, but they remain beneath the waves. Many seamounts are ancient, their volcanic activity having ceased millions of years ago. However, some remain active, occasionally releasing heat and minerals into the surrounding water. Interestingly, repeated volcanic eruptions can build seamounts so tall that they eventually break through the ocean surface, forming islands that rise above the waves. The Mariana Trench represents the deepest point on Earth's surface, and it lies within the Hydrothermal Zone, which is located below the Abyssal Zone. The Hydrothermal Zone includes the deepest ocean trenches, places where the ocean plunges even deeper than the already extreme depths of the Abyssal Zone. Within the Mariana Trench lies a feature called the Challenger Deep, which reaches a depth of approximately 10,971 meters. To conceive of this depth, imagine Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth, placed at the bottom of this trench. The summit of Everest would still be more than a mile underwater. The abyssal plains are continuously shaped by the slow accumulation of sediment and by the movement of deep ocean currents. These currents, though moving slowly, are constant and relentless. Over millions of years, they gently reshape the landscape, moving sediment from one location to another, creating subtle features and patterns on the abyssal plain. The sediments are also influenced by the movement of tectonic plates beneath them, which can create gentle slopes and depressions. The formation of the Abyssal Zone itself is tied to the cooling history of the Earth. The oldest portions of the ocean floor, found far from the mid-ocean ridges, are typically the deepest, having cooled and contracted over millions of years. The newest portions of ocean floor found near the ridges are higher and warmer. This relationship between age and depth creates a gentle slope from the ridge axis outward toward the continents, a slope so gradual as to be almost imperceptible to human observation. Fossils of ancient marine organisms can sometimes be found in the sediments of the Abyssal Zone. These fossils are windows into Earth's ancient oceans, allowing scientists to understand how ocean conditions have changed over vast stretches of geological time. The shells and remains of creatures that lived millions or even hundreds of millions of years ago are preserved in the sediments, creating a record of Earth's biological history written in stone. Understanding the geology of the abyssal zone is essential for understanding our entire planet. The processes that shape the abyssal plain are the same processes that shape the continents, that create mountains, that build and destroy ocean basins. The abyssal zone is not a static place, but rather a dynamic landscape constantly being reshaped by forces operating on geological timescales, forces so slow and gradual that they seem almost imperceptible to human observation, yet incredibly powerful when viewed across the span of millions of years. Segment 3. The extreme environment of the deep. To truly understand the abyssal zone, we must contemplate the extreme environmental conditions that define this realm. The combination of characteristics that describe the abyss creates one of the harshest environments imaginable. Yet life has found ways not merely to endure these conditions, but to flourish within them. The pressure in the abyssal zone increases at a rate of approximately 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of depth. Imagine beginning at the surface, where you experience 1 atmosphere of pressure exerted by the air above you. Now imagine descending 10 meters into the water. You now experience 2 atmospheres of pressure. Continue descending. At 100 meters, you experience 11 atmospheres. At 1,000 meters, you experience 101 atmospheres. At 6,000 meters, the pressure reaches approximately 600 atmospheres, creating an environment where water itself becomes compressed, its density increasing, its properties changing subtly in ways that would seem impossible to creatures evolved on the surface. The near-freezing temperatures of the abyssal zone maintain remarkable stability. Unlike surface waters, where seasonal variations cause temperatures to fluctuate wildly, abyssal waters remain perpetually cold. The sources of abyssal water lie in the polar regions, where water is chilled to frigid temperatures. This cold water, being dense, sinks and begins a journey that will take thousands of years. As it moves through the ocean depths, far from the warming influence of the sun, it maintains its frigid temperature. Eventually, this water reaches the abyssal zone, bringing with it the cold of the polar seas. The abyssal zone is isolated from surface weather and seasonal changes to a degree almost impossible to comprehend. A hurricane at the surface creates turbulence that might penetrate perhaps 100 meters downward. The abyssal zone lies so far below that such surface storms are utterly imperceptible. Winter and summer mean nothing in the abyss. The passage of months and seasons leaves no imprint on the darkness and cold below. This stability of environment, while certainly harsh, provides a consistency that allows creatures to evolve physiologies perfectly suited to unchanging conditions. Salinity in the abyssal zone maintains remarkable stability, ranging between 34.6 and 35.0 parts per thousand. This extremely narrow range represents some of the most stable salinity conditions found anywhere in the ocean. The salts dissolved in abyssal water remain in nearly constant proportions, creating an environment whose chemical composition is almost predictable. For creatures that have evolved in this environment, this stability is essential. Their bodies have adjusted to these precise conditions, and significant variations could prove lethal. Oxygen levels in the abyssal zone are lower than in surface waters, but the situation is more complex than simple scarcity. There exist regions of extreme oxygen minimum zones where oxygen levels drop to near zero concentrations. However, in most of the abyssal zone, sufficient oxygen exists to support life. This oxygen arrives through the slow circulation of ocean water, a process called thermohaline circulation. Water sinks in polar regions, travels along the ocean bottom for thousands of years, and gradually mixes with surrounding water, bringing oxygen to even the most remote depths. The darkness of the abyssal zone is absolute and complete in ways that human language struggles to convey. In the deepest caves on land, there remains a faint possibility of light penetrating through fissures or cracks. In the abyssal zone, this possibility does not exist. The water above, layer upon layer upon layer, filters out every photon of light. Creatures in the abyss do not experience day and night. They do not know darkness and light as alternating conditions. They know only darkness, an eternal night that has persisted for millions of years and will continue unchanged for millions more. Nutrient concentrations in the abyssal zone are significantly higher than in surface waters. This seems counterintuitive, as the abyss receives no energy from the sun. Yet the constant rain of organic matter from above concentrates nutrients in the deep. Dead plankton, fecal pellets, and the debris of surface life settle slowly downward. As they decompose, they release their chemical constituents, enriching the waters and sediments of the abyss. Though the total food available in the abyss is limited compared to surface ecosystems, the nutrients it contains are relatively concentrated. The abyssal zone plays a crucial role in the global carbon cycle and in regulating Earth's climate. The ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, removing this greenhouse gas from the air. Much of this carbon is transported to the deep ocean through various mechanisms, where it is stored in the form of dissolved carbon dioxide and sedimentary carbon. The abyssal zone, covering so much of our planet, can store and sequester vast quantities of carbon for extended periods. Abyssal sediments have the remarkable ability to store carbon for millions of years. Once organic material settles to the bottom and becomes incorporated into the sediments, it is effectively removed from rapid cycling in the active biosphere. Some of this carbon is converted into new forms by biological and chemical processes, while other portions remain locked away in sedimentary layers. These sediments thus represent a vast carbon reservoir, and understanding how they function is essential for understanding climate change and Earth's long-term climate stability. The abyssal zone operates on timescales that dwarf human comprehension. A water molecule entering the abyssal zone will remain there for thousands of years before returning to the surface. A grain of sediment settling to the bottom might remain undisturbed for millions of years. The processes that shape the abyss operate slowly, almost imperceptibly, yet accumulate over time to create dramatic changes. To understand the abyss is to train oneself to think in terms of geological time, to imagine processes unfolding across the span of millions of years, and to appreciate the slow dance of planetary systems that operates far beyond the range of human perception. Segment 4. The mysterious creatures of the abyss. The animals that inhabit the abyssal zone represent some of the most remarkable examples of evolution on our planet. Each creature has been shaped by millions of years of natural selection to survive and thrive in conditions that would instantly kill any surface-dwelling organism. Their bodies, their behaviors, their very biochemistry reflects the extreme demands of their environment. Animals in the abyssal zone have evolved extraordinary adaptations to contend with the high pressure, low temperatures, and perpetual darkness. Many of these adaptations seem strange and alien to those of us familiar only with surface life. A creature born in the abyss and transported to the surface would likely die of the pressure change, just as a surface creature brought to the abyss would perish. Each creature is exquisitely adapted to its own realm, unable to survive anywhere else. Many abyssal creatures are bioluminescent, producing light through internal chemical reactions. In the absolute darkness of the abyss, the ability to produce light is an enormous advantage. Bioluminescence is created through chemical reactions within specialized cells, where particular compounds interact to release energy in the form of light. This light requires no fuel from outside sources, no dependence on sunlight. Instead, it is generated internally using energy extracted from the creature's food. While this seems energetically expensive, for creatures in the abyss, the benefits often outweigh the costs. Bioluminescence serves multiple functions in the abyss. Many creatures use it for communication with others of their kind, flashing signals in the darkness that can be perceived by other bioluminescent creatures. Others use bioluminescence to attract prey, creating lures that tempt smaller creatures within striking distance. Some creatures use bioluminescent displays for camouflage, a strategy called counter-illumination, where they produce light along their undersides to make their silhouettes disappear when viewed from below. Remarkably, in a realm of such darkness, light becomes a tool as important as teeth or speed. Food sources are desperately scarce in the abyssal zone. Unlike surface ecosystems, where plants provide a constant influx of new energy through photosynthesis, the abyss depends entirely on food that drifts down from above or is generated locally through chemosynthesis. This scarcity of food has shaped the behavior and metabolism of abyssal creatures in fundamental ways. Many abyssal organisms have evolved slow metabolisms that allow them to function on minimal energy intake. They move slowly, they hunt slowly, they live slowly. In exchange for this sluggish lifestyle, they can survive extended periods between meals. Some abyssal species are slow-moving and have reduced metabolic rates that allow them to persist on very limited food supplies. These creatures do not engage in the frenetic activity of surface creatures, constantly searching for food and engaged in predator-prey interactions. Instead, they move deliberately through the water, conserving energy at every step. When they locate food, they pursue it with measured patience. This lifestyle allows them to survive in an ecosystem where food is incredibly sparse. Food sources in the abyssal zone come from multiple origins. The primary source is a slow rain of organic matter from the more productive waters above. Dead plankton, fecal pellets, and fragments of larger organisms settle slowly downward, creating a diffuse nutrient input that sustains much of the abyssal ecosystem. However, this rain of detritus is unpredictable and often sparse. It arrives in patches, creating temporary abundance, followed by extended periods of scarcity. Some abyssal species rely on chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis deriving their energy from chemicals released by hydrothermal vents. These remarkable oases of life exist in specific locations where the Earth's interior heat creates conditions similar in some ways to surface hot springs. Chemicals such as hydrogen sulfide, which would be toxic in surface environments, are converted into energy-rich compounds by chemosynthetic bacteria. These bacteria form the base of food chains that support a diverse community of creatures found nowhere else on Earth. Whale falls represent another crucial food source for abyssal creatures. When a whale dies and sinks to the bottom, it creates what scientists call a whale fall, essentially a massive injection of food into an otherwise food-poor ecosystem. Dozens or even hundreds of species may congregate on a single whale carcass, feasting on the abundance of food. Different species arrive in different stages, creating a succession of communities that persist for years as the whale slowly decomposes. A single whale fall can sustain populations of deep-sea creatures for extended periods. Abyssal communities include an astonishing diversity of creatures despite the harsh conditions. Fish of many species inhabit the abyss, though most are small and possess unusual anatomy. Crustaceans, including shrimp-like creatures and amphipods, scavenge across the abyssal plain. Echinoderms, relatives of starfish and sea urchins, crawl slowly across the bottom. Unique microbes, bacteria, and archaea, unlike anything found in surface environments, thrive in the sediments and water. Cephalopods, octopuses, and squid pursue their prey with remarkable intelligence and agility despite the crushing pressure and darkness. Many abyssal species have evolved large mouths and extendable stomachs that allow them to maximize food intake when an opportunity presents itself. A creature in the abyss cannot afford to be picky about food. When a meal opportunity arrives, the creature must take full advantage. Some fish possess mouths so large that they can swallow prey nearly as large as themselves. Their stomachs stretch to accommodate massive meals, storing the food to be digested slowly over extended periods. This strategy allows them to process large meals efficiently when food is scarce. Abyssal animals often have reduced or entirely absent eyes, as vision is essentially useless in the perpetual darkness. This might seem like a disadvantage, but in the context of the abyssal environment, the loss of eyes represents an adaptation. Eyes are metabolically expensive organs to maintain, requiring significant energy to develop and upkeep. For creatures that need to conserve every calorie, investing in non-functional eyes is wasteful. Over evolutionary time, many abyssal creatures have lost their eyes or reduced them to minimal vestigial structures. Others have retained functional eyes but have modified them dramatically, creating larger photoreceptor cells that can detect even faint light or bioluminescence. Segment 5. The anatomy and adaptations of deep-sea life. The physical forms of abyssal creatures reveal the fingerprints of adaptation, each detail shaped by the demands of deep-sea existence. Looking at the body structures of these creatures is like reading a history of their evolutionary journey, a history written not in words but in flesh and bone. Some abyssal organisms possess elongated bodies and large fins that help them move efficiently through the water in a low-energy environment. The water of the abyss is very dense due to extreme pressure, making movement through it more difficult than movement through surface waters. Creatures have evolved streamlined shapes that minimize resistance and maximize efficiency. The large fins allow for greater control of movement and the ability to hover in place using minimal energy expenditure. This efficiency of movement is essential for creatures that must conserve every joule of energy. Abyssal creatures often have fragile, delicate bodies, very different from the robust structures of surface organisms. This fragility reflects the simple fact that predators are rare in the abyss, and large, powerful muscles are expensive to maintain. Many creatures are primarily soft-bodied, with minimal skeletal support. They are transparent or nearly transparent, another adaptation that seems strange but makes sense in context. In a realm where predators primarily hunt using bioluminescence or lateral line senses, invisibility provides better protection than armor. The coloration of abyssal creatures reveals fascinating adaptations to their environment. Many are deep red or black, colors that absorb the wavelengths of light produced by bioluminescent creatures. A creature colored in bright red appears black in the bioluminescent light of the abyss, rendering it invisible. This camouflage has evolved through countless generations of natural selection, where creatures that could avoid being seen had higher survival rates than their more visible cousins. The sensory systems of abyssal creatures have evolved in remarkable ways to compensate for the absence of light. Many species have evolved enormous eyes, with photoreceptor cells of unusual size and sensitivity. These eyes can detect even the faintest bioluminescent glow, allowing the creature to navigate and hunt in near-total darkness. Some creatures have evolved other sensory systems entirely, including lateral line organs that can detect vibrations in the water, allowing them to sense the presence of other creatures without seeing them. Many abyssal creatures possess reduced or minimal skeletal structures, another adaptation that reflects the conditions of their environment. Skeletal systems require calcium and phosphorus to develop and maintain, elements that must be extracted from food or from the surrounding environment. For creatures in a food-poor realm, building and maintaining heavy skeletons is metabolically expensive. Some creatures have evolved extremely flexible bodies with minimal bone structure, allowing them to move through spaces impossible for surface creatures and to contort their bodies into shapes necessary for capturing and consuming prey. The sensory systems that abyssal creatures have evolved represent fascinating solutions to the problem of navigating and hunting in darkness. Some creatures have evolved chemoreceptors of extraordinary sensitivity, allowing them to detect the chemical traces of potential prey from considerable distances. When an animal dies and begins to decompose, it releases chemicals into the water. A creature with extremely sensitive chemoreceptors can follow these chemical trails across the abyssal plane to locate the source of food. Some abyssal fish possess remarkable bioluminescent organs called photophores, which they can control with precision to create patterns of light. These patterns serve multiple functions. Some appear to function as species recognition signals, allowing creatures to identify potential mates in the darkness. Others may function as species recognition signals that allow predators to identify suitable prey. The evolution of these light organs has been guided by competition and natural selection, with creatures developing increasingly complex light displays. Abyssal creatures often exhibit extreme sexual dimorphism, meaning males and females differ dramatically in size and appearance. In some species, males are tiny creatures that attach themselves parasitically to much larger females, literally fusing with them and becoming part of their bodies. This extreme strategy may reflect the difficulty of finding a mate in the vastness of the abyss. A creature that has successfully located a mate cannot afford to let that mate escape, leading to the evolution of permanent attachment. The reproduction strategies of abyssal creatures are diverse and often remarkable. Some produce eggs or larvae that drift upward into the water column, where they develop in the relatively productive waters at intermediate depths before returning to the abyss as juveniles. Others produce relatively few but large eggs, investing heavily in each offspring to maximize survival chances. Still others engage in broadcast spawning, releasing vast numbers of gametes into the water in the hope that some will meet and develop successfully. The biochemistry of abyssal creatures has evolved to function under the extreme conditions of their environment. Proteins in abyssal creatures are structured differently than those in surface organisms, allowing them to remain functional under the extreme pressure. Cell membranes possess different lipid compositions that allow them to remain flexible despite the cold and pressure. Enzymes function at optimum efficiency despite temperatures that would slow or stop them in surface organisms. Every aspect of abyssal creature biology has been refined by evolution to thrive in the deep. Segment 6: Food Chains and Survival Strategies. Survival in the abyss requires not just physical adaptations, but also behavioral strategies and ecological relationships. The food chains of the Abyssal Zone differ fundamentally from those of surface ecosystems, lacking the massive photosynthetic base that supports most life on Earth. The base of most abyssal food chains is the slow rain of organic material from above, a phenomenon scientists call marine snow. This organic debris is composed of many components. Dead plankton, which may have been near the surface just days before, begin their long journey to the bottom. These tiny creatures, often just micrometers in size, aggregate into larger particles as they sink, collecting with other organic debris and becoming incorporated into larger clumps. Fecal pellets from creatures that fed on plankton contribute significantly to marine snow, as do the skeletal parts and discarded tissues of various organisms. The sinking speed of marine snow varies dramatically depending on its composition and structure. Some particles sink very slowly, drifting downward for months. Others sink more quickly, reaching the bottom within days. As marine snow drifts downward through the water column, it is consumed by midwater creatures, microbes, and other organisms. By the time it reaches the Abyssal Zone, much of the original organic material has been consumed, and what arrives at the bottom is a much altered version of what left the surface. The creatures that benefit from marine snow are specialized to exploit this resource efficiently. Detritivores, creatures that feed on dead organic material, have evolved large mouths and sensitive chemoreceptors that allow them to detect falling particles. Some remain relatively stationary in positions where they can intercept particles drifting downward. Others actively hunt for marine snow, using their sensory systems to locate accumulated patches. Chemosynthetic ecosystems in the Abyssal Zone represent a completely different food chain entirely, one that operates independently of the surface productivity. In these systems, bacteria using energy from chemicals like hydrogen sulfide form the base of the food chain. These chemosynthetic bacteria can be free-living or can form symbiotic relationships with larger creatures. Some abyssal animals farm chemosynthetic bacteria, keeping them in specialized tissues and harvesting the energy they produce through chemical reactions. The discovery of chemosynthetic ecosystems around hydrothermal vents fundamentally changed our understanding of the limits of life. For centuries, scientists believed that all life on Earth ultimately depended on photosynthesis, on the ability of plants and photosynthetic organisms to convert sunlight into chemical energy. The discovery of thriving communities powered entirely by chemosynthesis demonstrated that life could persist independently of the sun, that energy could be extracted from chemicals deep within the Earth. This realization suggested that life might exist on other planets or moons where sunlight does not penetrate. Whale falls create dramatic food web events in the abyssal ecosystem. When a large whale sinks to the bottom, it represents an enormous injection of food into a food-poor environment. The process of whale fall consumption occurs in stages, each dominated by different communities of creatures. In the first stage, immediately after the whale arrives, large scavengers such as sharks and large fish congregate, feasting on the soft tissues. These mobile predators may consume significant amounts of meat before departing. As the large scavengers depart and the soft tissues are depleted, smaller scavengers move in. Crustaceans, including isopods and amphipods, swarm across the surface of the carcass, feeding on remaining tissue and on the bacteria that colonize the whale's body. Specialized bacteria proliferate in the whale's soft tissues and body cavity, creating conditions that are hostile to many other organisms but welcoming to scavengers adapted to high bacterial loads. The final stages of whale fall consumption involve the slow decomposition of the bone itself. The lipid-rich interior of whale bones sustains a specialized community of creatures, including bacteria, that use the fats stored in the bone for energy. These bone-eating bacteria create conditions favorable for other specialized organisms that have evolved to exploit this unique food source. A single whale can sustain a thriving ecosystem for years after its death, providing a temporary oasis of food in a sea of scarcity. The ecological implications of whale falls extend beyond the immediate feeding. The nutrients released from a decaying whale fertilize the surrounding water and sediments, creating a local enrichment that can support higher densities of organisms for considerable distances from the whale itself. Isotope studies have shown that creatures living near whale falls can derive significant portions of their nutrition from whale-derived material, even at substantial distances from the actual carcass. Competition for food in the abyss is less intense than in surface ecosystems, not because food is less valuable, but because it is so scarce that most creatures are operating below their maximum potential. However, competition still exists, particularly around localized food sources such as whale falls. Creatures that arrive first to a new food source gain significant advantages, consuming the most nutritious parts before later arrivals. This has led to the evolution of rapid growth in early life stages, allowing young creatures to reach sizes where they can compete successfully for food. Predator-prey relationships in the abyss are profoundly different from those in surface ecosystems. Predators are rare simply because prey is scarce. A large predator population cannot be sustained by the small amount of available prey. Instead, the predators that exist are often relatively small themselves, capable of surviving on the limited prey available. They move slowly through the water, investing minimal energy, and are patient hunters willing to wait for prey to approach. Many abyssal creatures have evolved strategies to reduce their energy expenditure while hunting. Some remain nearly motionless, conserving energy while waiting for prey to approach. Others employ ambush tactics, striking with explosive speed when prey comes within range. Still others engage in pursuit predation, tracking prey across the abyssal plain with patient determination. Each strategy has evolved because it optimizes energy efficiency for that particular creature in that particular environment. Symbiotic relationships flourish in the Abyssal Zone, with creatures often depending on each other for survival. Some creatures farm chemosynthetic bacteria, housing them in specialized tissues and providing a protected environment in exchange for a portion of the chemical energy they produce. Other creatures engage in cleaning relationships, where one creature removes parasites from another in exchange for food. These relationships demonstrate that survival in the abyss is not simply a matter of individual strength, but of cooperative relationships and mutual benefit. Segment 7. The Geological Record and Deep Sea Sediments. The sediments that blanket the abyssal plain tell a story of Earth's history, a narrative written in layers of clay, shells, and the remains of ancient organisms. Reading these sediments requires patience and knowledge, but the rewards include glimpses into Earth's deep past. Abyssal sediments are composed of varied materials depending on the specific location and depth. In shallower regions of the Abyssal Zone, calcareous ooze forms the primary sediment type. That material is composed of the calcium carbonate shells and skeletons of countless tiny organisms that lived in surface waters before sinking to the bottom. The accumulation of trillions of tiny shells over millions of years creates layers of sediment rich in calcium carbonate. Below 4,000 meters, the conditions change dramatically and calcium carbonate becomes chemically unstable. The cold, high-pressure waters and slightly acidic chemistry at these depths cause calcium carbonate to dissolve. This dissolution creates what is called the calcium carbonate compensation depth, the boundary below which calcium carbonate shells cannot accumulate. Below this depth, the primary sediments are instead composed of brown clays, which are finely divided mineral particles, and siliceous remains, which include the hard shells of diatoms and radiolarians that are resistant to dissolution. The accumulation of abyssal sediments is a process that unfolds across timescales of thousands to millions of years. The finest particles settle at rates measured in millimeters per 1,000 years. A single layer of sediment might take thousands of years to accumulate, and yet the abyssal sediments can reach depths of several kilometers in some locations, representing accumulation over hundreds of millions of years. These layers form a geological archive, with older deposits buried deeper beneath younger sediments. Abyssal sediments can contain fossils of organisms that lived in surface waters millions or even hundreds of millions of years ago. These fossils are sometimes remarkably well preserved, their shells and skeletons captured in the surrounding sediment and protected from further degradation. By studying these fossils, scientists can determine what organisms lived in a particular ocean at a particular time, and by extension, what conditions existed in that ancient ocean. The layers of abyssal sediment record changes in ocean productivity over vast stretches of geological time. During periods of high productivity in surface waters, more organic material falls to the bottom, creating layers rich in organic content. During periods of lower productivity, the sediments contain less organic material. By analyzing the composition of sediment layers, scientists can reconstruct productivity patterns that extended back millions of years. Abyssal sediments also record changes in Earth's climate. During ice ages, when substantial portions of Earth's surface are covered with glaciers and ice sheets, the composition of abyssal sediments changes. The release of sediment from glaciers can alter the clay content of deep-sea sediments. Changes in ocean circulation patterns alter where different sediment types accumulate. Changes in water temperature affect which organisms thrive in surface waters and which shells eventually reach the bottom. All of these changes leave imprints in the abyssal sediments. The rate of sedimentation in the abyssal zone varies dramatically depending on location. Near continents, where sediment is transported to the ocean by rivers and by submarine currents, sedimentation rates can reach several centimeters per 1,000 years. In the mid-ocean, far from continental influences, sedimentation rates may be mere millimeters per 1,000 years. These differences in sedimentation rate affect the thickness of sediment layers and influence the rate at which new information is recorded in the sedimentary archive. Abyssal sediments are shaped and rearranged by the movement of deep ocean currents. These currents, moving at speeds of mere centimeters per second, nonetheless have profound effects over thousands of years. They can transport sediment particles considerable distances, creating patterns of sedimentation that reveal the pathways of ancient ocean currents. Sediment ripples on the abyssal plain record the presence and direction of deep-sea currents, creating a physical record of water movement. The movement of tectonic plates also influences abyssal sediments. In locations where oceanic crust is being subducted, sediments are slowly transported downward into the mantle where they eventually melt. This process removes sediments from the surface, preventing indefinite accumulation. In regions of active seafloor spreading, new crust brings fresh oceanic crust to the surface, providing new foundations for sediment accumulation. Fossils found in abyssal sediments have provided crucial information about extinction events in Earth's history. The famous boundary layer between the Cretaceous and Paleogene periods, marked by a thin layer of iridium-rich clay in abyssal sediments, records the impact of the asteroid that caused the mass extinction event 66 million years ago. This thin layer, found in sediments around the world, provided key evidence for understanding how a catastrophic impact event had reshaped Earth's biosphere. The study of abyssal sediments has shown that ocean temperatures have fluctuated over geological time. By analyzing the isotopic composition of shells found in sediment layers, scientists can determine the temperature of the ocean water in which those shells formed. These temperature records, extending back millions of years, show patterns of climate change that long predate human civilization and help scientists understand the natural variability of Earth's climate system. Segment 8. The role of the abyss in Earth's climate system. The abyssal zone plays a crucial and often underappreciated role in regulating Earth's climate. The vast amount of water and sediment in the abyss, combined with the slow circulation of deep ocean water, makes the abyss a massive reservoir for storing heat and carbon. The abyssal zone is a major reservoir for excess carbon, helping to regulate the planet's climate system. Carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is continuously absorbed by the ocean surface, particularly in regions of upwelling, where nutrients bring carbon dioxide-rich water to the surface. Once dissolved in seawater, carbon dioxide can be transported to the deep ocean through various mechanisms, where it is effectively removed from rapid cycling in the atmosphere. One crucial mechanism for carbon transport to the abyss is through the sinking of organic material. When organisms in surface waters die, they sink toward the bottom. As they sink, they are partially consumed by mid-water creatures, but some portion reaches the abyss and becomes incorporated into the sediments. This organic carbon remains in the sediments for extended periods, effectively sequestering carbon from the atmosphere for thousands to millions of years. Another important mechanism for carbon transport is the solubility pump. As ocean water cools in polar regions, it becomes denser and sinks. Colder water can dissolve more carbon dioxide than warmer water, so as this water cools and sinks, it carries dissolved carbon dioxide with it. As this deep water slowly spreads throughout the world's oceans, it transports carbon to even the most remote regions of the abyss. The abyssal zone's role in the carbon cycle is particularly important in the context of climate change. As atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations rise due to human activities, more carbon is absorbed by the ocean. The ocean has acted as a buffer against climate change, absorbing approximately 1/4 of all human-produced carbon dioxide emissions. However, this buffer capacity is not infinite, and the constant absorption of carbon dioxide is changing the chemistry of the deep ocean in ways that could have significant consequences. Abyssal sediments store carbon for millions of years through a process called long-term carbon storage. Once organic material is buried in sediments, it is protected from further oxidation and decomposition for extended periods. Some of this carbon is eventually released through geological processes, such as when sediments are subducted and melted in the mantle, but much of it remains locked away in sedimentary rocks for geological timescales. The thermohaline circulation, the global system of deep ocean currents that connects all the world's oceans, is driven by density differences created by temperature and salinity variations. Cold, dense water sinks in polar regions and spreads through the abyss toward warmer latitudes, while warm water at the surface returns toward the poles, completing the circuit. This circulation takes thousands of years to complete a full cycle, making the deep ocean a very slow-responding component of the climate system. The extreme cold of the abyssal zone means that the water there can dissolve and store large quantities of carbon dioxide. As carbon dioxide dissolves in cold water, it forms carbonic acid, which reacts with minerals to form bicarbonate and carbonate ions. This process is called ocean acidification, and it is occurring at accelerating rates as atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations rise. The chemistry of the deep ocean is changing, with potentially significant consequences for deep-sea organisms and for the ocean's ability to continue absorbing carbon dioxide. The abyssal zone is one of the last great carbon sinks on Earth, where carbon removed from rapid cycling can be stored for extended periods. However, this storage is not permanent. Eventually, these stored carbons are returned to the atmosphere through various geological processes on timescales of millions to hundreds of millions of years. The abyss thus acts as both a carbon store and a carbon source, playing a crucial role in the long-term regulation of atmospheric carbon dioxide and climate. The response of the abyss to climate change is beginning to be understood through recent research. Rising temperatures at the surface are slowly warming the abyssal waters, a process that will take centuries to fully manifest due to the slow circulation of deep ocean water. This warming could have profound effects on deep-sea organisms and on the ocean's circulation patterns. Research has shown that deep-sea communities are sensitive to changes in temperature and oxygen levels. As oxygen levels decline in regions of oxygen minimum zones, the suitable habitat for most abyssal organisms shrinks. As temperatures increase, creatures adapted to consistent cold may face physiological stress. The combination of these changes could significantly alter the structure of abyssal ecosystems over coming decades and centuries. Segment 9. The discovery and exploration of the abyss. Human knowledge of the abyssal zone is remarkably recent. For most of human history, the ocean depths were an absolute mystery, their very existence in their current form unknown to science. Only in the last few centuries have technological advances made exploration of the abyss possible. Scientists have been systematically studying the abyssal zone since the 1960s, a period that coincides with the development of submersible technology. Before this era, knowledge of the abyss came primarily from indirect observations, such as seafloor samples collected by dredges or cores obtained by drilling. These methods provided glimpses into the abyss, but could not reveal the full picture of life and conditions there. Deep-sea submersibles and remotely operated vehicles, often abbreviated as ROVs, have revolutionized the study of the abyssal zone. Submersibles are small submarines operated by crews who can observe the abyss directly and interact with the environment. ROVs are robotic vehicles controlled from surface ships, allowing extended operations without risking human life. Both technologies have provided unprecedented access to the abyss and have enabled scientists to study deep-sea environments in detail. Early submersible explorations of the abyss revealed a realm far more diverse and complex than scientists had anticipated. Rather than finding empty, lifeless plains, explorers discovered thriving communities of unusual creatures and surprising abundance of life in many locations. These discoveries fundamentally altered scientific understanding of the limits of life and the strategies organisms could employ to survive in extreme environments. Sampling and imaging technologies have allowed researchers to collect data and specimens from the Abyssal Zone without requiring human presence. Scientific instruments deployed from ships can collect water samples, measure temperature and oxygen levels, and analyze the chemistry of the abyss. Cameras mounted on submersibles and ROVs provide visual documentation of abyssal environments and organisms. These technologies have created an ever-growing repository of information about the abyss. Abyssal research has revealed a surprising diversity of life in the deep ocean, a diversity that continues to astonish scientists. Estimates suggest that the vast majority of abyssal species remain undiscovered. Each new expedition to the abyss encounters species previously unknown to science. This ongoing discovery suggests that the abyss contains vastly more biodiversity than previously recognized. New species are still being discovered in the Abyssal Zone at a remarkable rate. Scientists estimate that hundreds of new species are discovered in the abyss each year. These discoveries have expanded our understanding of how life can be organized and how far the boundaries of life's tolerance extend. Some of these newly discovered species have properties that surprise even experienced marine biologists. Abyssal research has helped scientists understand the origins of life on Earth and the mechanisms of evolution. The study of organisms adapted to extreme conditions has provided insights into how life emerged and how it has become increasingly complex over billions of years. Some scientists believe that the chemical conditions around hydrothermal vents, similar to conditions hypothesized for the origin of life, make these regions particularly important for understanding life's deepest history. The deep ocean is increasingly recognized as playing a crucial role in Earth's climate system and in the maintenance of planetary habitability. Understanding how the abyss functions is essential for predicting how Earth's climate will respond to future changes in atmospheric composition and ocean chemistry. As human activities continue to alter the composition of the atmosphere and the chemistry of the ocean, the need to understand the abyss becomes ever more urgent. Technological advances continue to expand our ability to explore and study the abyss. New submersibles capable of reaching greater depths are being developed. Sophisticated sensors allow measurement of previously inaccessible parameters. Genetic analysis of abyssal organisms has revealed unexpected evolutionary relationships and new categories of life. The frontiers of abyssal science continue to expand. The human story of abyssal exploration represents a remarkable achievement of human ingenuity and determination. Despite the extreme challenges posed by the depth, pressure, darkness, and distance of the abyss, humans have managed to develop the technology and the methods to explore this realm. Each successful expedition expands our knowledge and deepens our understanding of our planet. Segment 10: Hydrothermal Vents and Chemosynthetic Oases. Hidden in the darkness of the Abyssal Zone lie some of the most remarkable ecosystems on Earth, concentrated around hydrothermal vents, locations where superheated water bearing dissolved minerals erupts from the seafloor into the surrounding ocean. Hydrothermal vents are found along mid-ocean ridges, the underwater mountain chains that crisscross the planet's oceans. These vents are located at the boundaries between tectonic plates, where new oceanic crust is being created. As magma rises from the Earth's interior, it heats groundwater that has percolated into the surrounding rock. This superheated water becomes less dense and rises back toward the surface, eventually being ejected into the ocean in spectacular plumes. The water emerging from hydrothermal vents can reach temperatures exceeding 400 degrees Celsius. At the point of emergence, the water is so hot that it would instantly vaporize if it were not under the extreme pressure of the deep ocean. As the hot water contacts the surrounding ocean water, which is near freezing, a dramatic thermal gradient is established. Remarkably, life has evolved to exploit this extreme environment, creating oases of production in the otherwise food-poor abyss. The mineral-rich fluids released by hydrothermal vents contain compounds such as hydrogen sulfide, methane, and various metals. In surface environments, hydrogen sulfide is a toxic gas that most organisms cannot tolerate. In the Abyssal Zone, however, certain specialized bacteria have evolved the ability to derive energy from oxidizing hydrogen sulfide. These chemosynthetic bacteria form the base of unique food chains that are independent of surface productivity. The discovery of hydrothermal vent ecosystems in 1977 fundamentally transformed scientific understanding of where life could exist and how it could be sustained. Before this discovery, scientists believed that all life on Earth depended ultimately on photosynthesis, on the conversion of sunlight into chemical energy. The realization that thriving ecosystems could exist powered entirely by chemosynthesis, using energy from chemicals released from the Earth's interior, expanded the possible habitats for life beyond what had previously been imagined. The communities of organisms that have evolved around hydrothermal vents are unlike anything found anywhere else on Earth. Giant tube worms, many meters in length, cluster densely around the vents. These tube worms possess no mouth or digestive tract, and instead house colonies of chemosynthetic bacteria within their tissues. The tube worms provide a protected habitat for the bacteria, while the bacteria provide the energy necessary for the tube worms to grow and survive. In addition to tube worms, hydrothermal vent communities include specialized crustaceans, fish, and microbes that have evolved remarkable adaptations to exploit the energy-rich environment. White bacteria form thick mats on the surfaces of rocks around the vents, visible to the naked eye in images from submersible cameras. These bacterial mats are so dense that they appear as thick coverings of snow or cotton around the vents. The distribution of life around hydrothermal vents reflects the gradient of temperature and chemistry established as hot vent fluid mixes with cold ambient seawater. Very close to the vent opening, where temperatures remain extreme, only the most heat-resistant microbes can survive. At intermediate distances, where temperatures have moderated to a few tens of degrees Celsius, diverse communities of larger organisms can thrive. At greater distances, where the thermal signal has dissipated entirely, the environment becomes indistinguishable from the surrounding abyss. The chemistry established by hydrothermal vents is complex and rapidly changing. The hot vent fluid contains dissolved minerals that precipitate out as they cool, forming distinctive chimneys of mineral deposits around the vent openings. These chimneys, composed of metals and mineral compounds, accumulate over time and can reach heights of many meters. The internal structures of chimneys create networks of passages where microbes and small creatures live. Different hydrothermal vents have different characteristics, leading to different communities of organisms. Some vents, called black smokers because of the dark coloration of their mineral-rich plumes, release particularly hot, metal-rich fluids that create dramatic visual effects. Others, called white smokers, release cooler fluids that precipitate lighter-colored minerals. The type of vent influences which organisms can establish themselves and which cannot. The stability and longevity of hydrothermal vents vary considerably. Some vents are active for decades or centuries, maintaining relatively stable conditions that allow complex communities to develop. Others are active for only years or less, subjecting any organisms that have established themselves to sudden and complete environmental changes. The organisms found at vents have evolved different reproductive and dispersal strategies, reflecting these varying levels of environmental stability. Research at hydrothermal vents has implications extending far beyond understanding deep-sea biology. Some scientists believe that the chemical conditions at hydrothermal vents may resemble conditions hypothesized for the origin of life on the early Earth. The availability of energy from chemical reactions, the presence of water and dissolved minerals, and the existence of thin barriers between different chemical environments, all found at hydrothermal vents, are conditions potentially favorable for the emergence of life. Segment 11. Cold seeps and methane ecosystems. Beyond the dramatic hydrothermal vents lies another category of remarkable abyssal habitat. Cold seeps, locations where methane and other hydrocarbons slowly seep from the seafloor, supporting unique ecosystems powered by chemosynthesis. Cold seeps are found in areas where methane and other hydrocarbons seep slowly from the seafloor into the overlying water. Unlike hydrothermal vents, which are associated with active volcanism and extremely high temperatures, cold seeps involve no dramatic heating. The fluids seeping from the bottom may actually be colder than the surrounding ambient seawater, or they may be at similar temperatures. What distinguishes cold seeps is the presence of chemical energy in the form of methane and other reduced compounds. The sources of methane at cold seeps are diverse. Some methane originates from decomposition of organic matter buried in sediments, a process called thermogenic methane production. Other methane has an even deeper origin, originating from geological processes within the Earth's crust and mantle. Some cold seeps release methane that has been produced by microbial processes in shallow sediments called biogenic methane. The source of the methane influences the chemistry of the seep and the communities that develop there. At cold seeps, specialized bacteria have evolved the ability to use methane as an energy source, oxidizing it to obtain the chemical energy necessary for life. These methanotrophic bacteria form the base of unique food chains. Some of these bacteria form direct symbiotic relationships with larger organisms, similar to the relationships found at hydrothermal vents. others remain free-living, but still form crucial links in food chains that support diverse communities of creatures. The communities that develop at cold seeps are often dominated by specialized organisms that have evolved to exploit methane and other hydrocarbon energy sources. Methane-consuming bacterial mats cover surfaces around active seeps, creating environments that appear initially barren, but that are actually teeming with microbial life. These mats consist of dense aggregations of bacteria, some engaged in methane oxidation and others specializing in other metabolic processes. In addition to bacterial mats, cold seeps host diverse assemblages of larger organisms, including clams, mussels, snails, and various crustaceans. Many of these organisms have evolved symbiotic relationships with chemosynthetic bacteria, housing the bacteria in specialized tissues and deriving nutrition from the bacteria's metabolic activities. Some of these organisms can grow quite large, with individual clams or mussels reaching dimensions similar to those of large terrestrial animals. The rate of seepage at cold seeps varies considerably from location to location and over time at individual seeps. Some seeps release methane at rates that create visible plumes of gas bubbles in the water, while others release methane so slowly that visual evidence of seepage is almost imperceptible. The rate of seepage influences the intensity of biological activity, with faster seeping vents supporting denser communities of organisms. Carbonates form a distinctive feature of many cold seeps. As methane is oxidized by bacteria, the chemical reactions involved can cause dissolved minerals to precipitate out of solution, forming deposits of calcium carbonate and other minerals. These carbonate formations can create distinctive rock formations around seeps, strikingly similar in some ways to the mineral chimneys found at hydrothermal vents, though formed through entirely different chemical processes. The temporal stability of cold seeps differs from that of hydrothermal vents. While hydrothermal vents are powered by volcanic activity and can change or cease activity relatively quickly, cold seeps appear to be more stable features that can persist for thousands of years or longer. This stability has allowed complex communities to develop and to persist over extended periods. The study of cold seeps has revealed that chemosynthetic energy sources are more widespread in the abyss than previously recognized. These seeps demonstrate that life can be sustained independently of photosynthesis, using entirely different chemical energy sources. This realization has profound implications for understanding the potential distribution of life in the universe, including the possibility of life on other worlds. Cold seeps also play a role in the biogeochemical cycling of elements, particularly carbon and sulfur. The oxidation of methane and other reduced compounds releases energy that is captured by microbes and used to fix carbon dioxide into organic compounds. This process removes carbon from circulation and sequestered it in biomass and sediments. Some estimates suggest that cold seeps and other chemosynthetic systems may play surprisingly significant roles in global carbon cycling. Segment 12: Seamounts and Deep Sea Habitats. Rising dramatically from the abyssal plains are seamounts, underwater volcanoes that create distinct habitats and support unique communities of organisms. These underwater mountains create some of the most complex habitats found in the deep ocean. Seamounts are underwater volcanoes that may rise thousands of meters from the abyssal plain, though they fall short of reaching the ocean surface. Some seamounts are ancient, their volcanic activity having ceased millions of years ago, while others remain actively volcanic. Many seamounts are scattered throughout the ocean basins, forming chains or clusters that mark the pathways of tectonic plates or mantle hotspots. The physical structure of seamounts creates environments fundamentally different from the surrounding abyssal plain. The sloping sides of seamounts create currents and chemical gradients not found on flat plains. The solid rock of seamount flanks provides surfaces for organisms to attach to, allowing the development of sessile communities composed of corals, sponges, and other attached organisms. The increased complexity of the habitat supports greater biodiversity than is found on the adjacent abyssal plains. Seamounts can host unique communities of deep-sea corals and sponges, organisms that are particularly abundant on seamount flanks. These corals are not the reef-building tropical corals found in shallow waters, but rather solitary corals, or sparse coral communities that grow extremely slowly. Some deep-sea corals are among the oldest organisms on Earth, with individual specimens potentially being thousands of years old. The slow growth rates of these corals make them vulnerable to damage and make populations' recovery from disturbances extremely slow. The dense communities of corals and sponges found on seamounts create habitat structure that supports diverse assemblages of fish and crustaceans. These larger animals feed on particles settling from above and on each other, creating complex food webs. Some species found on seamounts have nowhere else to live, having evolved to occupy specific niches in seamount habitats. The loss of seamounts or damage to seamount habitats could result in the extinction of species found nowhere else on Earth. Seamounts also influence ocean currents and water chemistry in their vicinity. As deep ocean currents encounter seamounts, the currents are deflected and compressed, creating regions of increased velocity. This accelerated flow brings more nutrient-rich water into the area, increasing local productivity. The deflection of currents can also create standing waves or eddies in the water, creating conditions favorable for the accumulation of organic matter. The biological productivity around seamounts often exceeds that of the surrounding abyssal plain by orders of magnitude. This high productivity reflects the enhanced supply of nutrients created by current interactions with seamounts. The elevated productivity supports higher densities of organisms than would be expected in the surrounding abyss, making seamounts particularly valuable habitats for deep-sea life. Deep-sea mining operations have been proposed for some areas containing mineral-rich seafloor deposits, some of which occur on or near seamounts. These mining activities would cause severe disturbance to seamount ecosystems, destroying habitat and scattering sediments that could bury surrounding organisms. The slow recovery rates of seamount communities mean that the effects of mining damage could persist for centuries or longer. The species found on seamounts are particularly vulnerable to human impacts because of their slow population growth rates and limited dispersal capabilities. Once a population on a seamount is destroyed, recolonization is extremely slow, potentially requiring centuries or millennia. This vulnerability makes seamount conservation particularly important. Seamounts provide crucial habitat for many fish species, including commercially valuable species. Some deep-sea fishing operations have targeted areas with seamounts, recognizing that the abundance of fish in these areas exceeds that of surrounding regions. Overfishing of seamount populations has depleted some populations, demonstrating that seamount ecosystems are not immune to human impacts despite their remoteness. The distribution of seamounts reveals patterns in Earth's geological history. Seamounts often form along tectonic spreading centers or above mantle hotspots that remain stationary while tectonic plates move over them. The age progression of seamounts in chains reflects the age progression of the oceanic crust on which they sit, providing evidence for plate motion and continental drift. Segment 13. The sensitivity of deep-sea ecosystems to change. Despite their remoteness and the perception of the abyss as a stable, unchanging realm, deep-sea ecosystems have proven to be surprisingly sensitive to environmental changes. Research has begun to reveal the vulnerability of these ancient communities to the perturbations introduced by human activities and climate change. Abyssal research has shown that deep-sea communities are sensitive to changes in temperature and oxygen levels, responding to even relatively small changes with shifts in community composition and abundance. These communities have evolved over millions of years in an environment of extraordinary stability, where temperatures and oxygen levels remained essentially constant. This evolutionary history has resulted in organisms with relatively narrow ranges of tolerance for environmental parameters. As climate change causes warming at the ocean's surface, heat gradually penetrates downward into the deep ocean. The process of deep ocean warming occurs slowly on timescales of centuries because the mixing of surface and deep water happens very gradually. However, the models suggest that substantial warming of deep waters is inevitable in coming centuries, even if surface warming is curtailed through mitigation efforts. This warming will expose deep-sea organisms to temperatures significantly higher than any they have experienced in millions of years. The response of deep-sea organisms to warming is not yet fully understood, but models and limited experimental evidence suggest that the effects could be significant. Organisms that have evolved to function optimally at temperatures near 0 degrees Celsius may experience metabolic stress at even modest temperature increases of 1 or 2 degrees. The complex biochemistry of deep-sea creatures, refined by evolution to function under specific conditions, may be disrupted by changes in water temperature. Oxygen levels in the deep ocean are similarly responding to climate change. As surface waters warm, they become less able to dissolve oxygen, leading to lower oxygen levels in newly subducted water. Additionally, changes in ocean circulation patterns can alter the distribution of oxygen in the deep ocean. Some models predict the expansion of oxygen minimum zones, regions where oxygen levels are so low that most organisms cannot survive. The expansion of these regions would reduce suitable habitat for most deep-sea organisms. Abyssal research has revealed that deep-sea ecosystems are vulnerable to human activities like deep-sea mining and pollution. Deep-sea mining operations propose to extract metals from mineral-rich sediments or mineral chimneys, would cause massive disturbance to abyssal communities. The removal of sediment and rock would destroy habitat, and the resuspension of sediment would cover surrounding areas with a blanket of disturbed material. These effects would persist for extremely long periods, as recovery is very slow in the deep ocean. Pollution, including microplastics and persistent organic pollutants, has been detected in the deepest regions of the ocean, including the Mariana Trench. These contaminants demonstrate that even the most remote regions of the ocean are not immune to the effects of human activities occurring far away. The long-term accumulation of contaminants in deep-sea sediments and organisms is a developing crisis that has only recently been recognized. The vulnerability of deep-sea ecosystems reflects their reliance on the continued functioning of biological and geochemical cycles. These cycles depend on the specific environmental conditions that have existed for millions of years. Disruption of these conditions, whether through climate change, mining, pollution, or other human activities, threatens to destabilize the delicate balance that supports deep-sea life. The slow generation times of deep-sea organisms make populations particularly vulnerable to overharvesting and environmental changes. A species that takes decades to mature and produces few offspring cannot rapidly recover from losses. Populations can be depleted without any obvious warning, and recovery, if it occurs at all, takes decades or centuries. The interconnectedness of deep-sea food webs means that the loss or decline of a single species can have cascading effects throughout the community. Many deep-sea organisms depend on specific food sources, often produced in specific locations. The disruption of these food sources can rapidly collapse entire communities. The removal of whale populations through whaling, for example, has eliminated a crucial food source in the form of whale falls, contributing to ecosystem changes in regions previously enriched by whale carcasses. The future of the abyss will depend on the actions taken in the coming years and decades. Protection of abyssal ecosystems through the establishment of marine protected areas, restrictions on deep-sea mining and fishing, and efforts to mitigate climate change could help preserve these remarkable communities. Conversely, continued exploitation and degradation of these ecosystems could result in the permanent loss of species and ecosystems that have taken millions of years to develop. The study of the abyss has revealed that life on Earth is far more diverse and resilient than previously imagined, yet also far more fragile when subjected to rapid change. The Abyssal Zone stands as a monument to the creativity of evolution and a reminder of how much Earth still holds that we do not understand. The future of this remarkable realm will be determined in part by the choices we make in the coming decades about how we treat the ocean and its communities. Segment 14: Future Research and the Mysteries that Remain. As we consider what lies ahead for abyssal science and exploration, we must acknowledge how much remains unknown about this vast realm. Despite decades of increasingly sophisticated research, the abyss holds secrets that will occupy scientists for generations to come. Abyssal research continues to reveal new species and unique ecosystems, with discoveries occurring at an accelerating pace as technology improves and more researchers focus on deep-sea studies. Each new expedition to the abyss expands the inventory of known creatures and deepens our understanding of the diversity of life under extreme conditions. Yet scientists estimate that the vast majority of abyssal species remain undiscovered, suggesting that decades of new discoveries lie ahead. The diversity of life forms that evolution has produced in response to the challenges of abyssal existence remains astonishing. Creatures with body forms unlike those found in surface ecosystems continue to surprise researchers. Some of the most recent discoveries include species with novel sensory systems, unusual reproductive strategies, and unprecedented biochemical capabilities. Each new discovery hints at the vast reservoir of biological possibility that remains unexplored. Abyssal research is essential for understanding the origins of life, evolution, and Earth's climate. The extreme environments of the abyss provide natural laboratories where the limits of life can be tested and the adaptations organisms require to survive under extreme conditions can be studied. This research illuminates how life originated under conditions very different from those of today, and how organisms have become increasingly complex and diverse through evolutionary processes. The role of the abyss in maintaining global biodiversity cannot be overstated. The deep ocean contains more organisms than all the terrestrial ecosystems on Earth combined, yet these organisms remain largely unknown and unprotected. The conservation of abyssal biodiversity remains a crucial but often overlooked aspect of global environmental protection. Technological advances continue to expand the possibilities for abyssal exploration and study. New submersibles capable of reaching ever greater depths are being developed, promising direct observation of the deepest regions of the ocean. Autonomous underwater vehicles capable of operating independently for extended periods offer possibilities for extended monitoring of abyssal environments. Genetic analysis of abyssal organisms, powered by increasingly sensitive molecular techniques, continues to reveal unexpected evolutionary relationships. Genomic studies of abyssal organisms have revealed remarkable adaptations at the molecular level. The proteins of deep-sea creatures are structured differently than those of surface organisms, allowing them to function under extreme pressure. The genes of abyssal organisms contain sequences never found before, suggesting entirely new classes of proteins and biochemical processes. The mining of these genetic resources promises discoveries relevant not only to understanding life, but potentially to developing new biotechnologies. The potential for discovering entirely new forms of life remains high. While we have discovered that life can be sustained by chemosynthesis, the full diversity of ways that energy and resources can be extracted from the environment remains incompletely understood. New energy sources, new chemical processes, and new classes of organisms may yet be discovered in the abyss. The role of the microbiota in deep-sea ecosystems remains incompletely understood. Bacteria and archaea compose the vast majority of the biomass in the abyss, yet we have only the most superficial understanding of the diversity of microbial communities and their ecological roles. Advanced molecular techniques are beginning to reveal the astonishing diversity of microbial life, with thousands of species represented in even small samples of abyssal sediment. The question of how life originated on Earth remains deeply mysterious, and the abyss provides important clues. The chemical conditions found around hydrothermal vents may resemble those of the early Earth. The discovery of organisms thriving in such extreme conditions suggests that the origins of life may have occurred in environments quite different from those long imagined by scientists. The possibility of life elsewhere in the universe has been profoundly influenced by discoveries in the abyss. The realization that life can exist independently of sunlight, that it can be sustained by energy from chemicals emerging from a planet's interior, suggests that life might persist on many other worlds that appear, at first glance, to be devoid of habitability. The exploration of the abyss, therefore, has implications extending far beyond the study of Earth, encompassing our understanding of the universe and the distribution of life within it. The future of abyssal research will likely involve increasing international cooperation as scientists from many nations work together to understand this shared global heritage. The abyss belongs to no nation, and its study requires coordinated efforts across political boundaries. The knowledge gained from abyssal research is knowledge that belongs to all of humanity, contributing to our collective understanding of our planet and our place within it. The abyss stands as one of the last great frontiers of human knowledge, a realm as mysterious and exotic in many ways as the surfaces of distant planets. The decades and centuries ahead will bring increasing understanding of this remarkable realm. Yet some mysteries of the abyss may persist indefinitely, maintaining the sense of wonder and mystery that has always drawn human minds to explore the unknown. As we drift through this final contemplation of the Abyssal Zone, let us take a moment to appreciate the sheer wonder of what exists in the depths below. Thousands of meters beneath the surface, in perpetual darkness and crushing pressure, life persists in forms that challenge our understanding of what is possible. Entire ecosystems flourish in conditions that seem utterly hostile to existence. Communities of creatures have evolved in isolation from the surface world for millions of years, creating ways of life unknown to science until recent decades. The Abyssal Zone represents a triumph of evolution, a testament to the creativity of natural selection and the resilience of life. It stands as a reminder that our planet is far richer in life and diversity than we can perceive, and that our understanding of the world around us remains incomplete. The exploration of the abyss is ultimately an exploration of the possibilities of life itself, an investigation into the limits of existence and the boundless variety of solutions that evolution has produced in response to Earth's many challenges. Segment 15. The connection between surface and abyss. Though the Abyssal Zone seems utterly isolated from the surface world, existing in perpetual darkness thousands of meters below, the two realms are inextricably linked through countless connections and interactions. Understanding the Abyssal Zone requires understanding how deeply it depends on and influences the surface world. The most obvious connection between surface and abyss is the slow drift of organic matter downward, the continuous rain of marine snow that provides the fundamental food source for abyssal life. Each day, countless organisms in the productive surface waters die, and their remains begin the long journey to the bottom. This journey takes months for some particles and years for others, creating a delayed connection between events at the surface and consequences in the abyss. The plankton that forms the base of surface ocean food webs eventually becomes the primary food source for the abyss. Small zooplankton graze on phytoplankton in the upper ocean and in turn are consumed by larger creatures. When these creatures die, they sink, carrying the energy they accumulated in the surface waters downward to feed creatures in the abyss. In this way, the productivity of surface waters directly determines the abundance of life in the deep. Seasonal fluctuations in surface productivity create corresponding changes in the food supply reaching the abyss. During spring and summer, when days are long and sunlight is intense, surface productivity increases dramatically. Phytoplankton blooms occur, creating temporary abundances of plant biomass. These blooms feed zooplankton, which in turn feed larger creatures. When these organisms die and sink, they create pulses of food, reaching the abyss weeks or months later. Deep-sea creatures have evolved responses to these pulses, altering their behavior and metabolism to take advantage of temporary food abundance. The global ocean currents that connect surface and deep waters operate on vast timescales, transporting water and dissolved substances from one region to another. A water molecule that sinks in the North Atlantic will not return to the surface for 1,000 years or more. During this time, it travels through the entire global ocean, passing beneath every continent and island. The dissolved oxygen it carries sustains life in those distant abyssal regions. The nutrients it contains eventually return to the surface, where they support new growth. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, a major component of global ocean circulation, connects the surface waters of the North Atlantic with the abyss in a way that profoundly influences both realms. Cold, dense water sinks in polar regions of the North Atlantic and spreads slowly toward the equator and into the Southern Ocean. This circulation carries heat, nutrients, and dissolved gases throughout the ocean. Changes to this circulation, whether from climate change or other causes, would have dramatic consequences for both surface and deep ecosystems. The connection between surface and abyss includes the movement of gases, particularly oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen is transported to depth through the circulation of water masses, while carbon dioxide is transported both as dissolved gas and as part of organic material. The abyss acts as a vast storage reservoir for carbon, removing it from rapid cycling and storing it for extended periods. This storage moderates the rate of atmospheric carbon dioxide increase, providing a crucial service that affects global climate. Whale migrations connect the abyss to distant surface regions. Whales live and feed in surface waters, accumulating vast amounts of biomass, and then migrate to breeding grounds often thousands of kilometers away. When they die, the carcasses sink to the bottom, potentially far from the regions where the whales lived. A whale that fed in polar waters might sink on the abyssal plain near the equator, carrying nutrients and energy across vast oceanic distances. The historical importance of whaling to understanding the Abyssal Zone cannot be overstated. The large populations of whales that existed before the industrial whaling era likely created abundant whale falls across the global ocean. The systematic depletion of whale populations through whaling eliminated a significant food source for abyssal creatures, representing a major disruption to deep-sea food webs that occurred over just a few decades. The recovery of whale populations is slowly restoring whale falls to abyssal ecosystems, but populations remain far below historical levels. Nutrient cycling connects surface and abyss through the biological and chemical transformations of essential elements. Nitrogen fixed in the euphotic zone is incorporated into organic matter that eventually reaches the abyss. In the abyss, microbes transform this nitrogen into dissolved forms that slowly return to the surface through upwelling. This cycling takes centuries or longer to complete, but is crucial for maintaining the nutrient balance of the entire ocean. Volcanic eruptions and the release of gases from the Earth's interior represent another connection between the internal planet and the abyss. Hydrothermal vents release energy-rich chemicals into the abyss. Some of these chemicals eventually react with oxygen and are removed from the system, while others persist and influence the chemistry of abyssal waters. Over geological timescales, the rate of chemical release from the Earth's interior influences the composition of the ocean and the conditions available for life. The abyssal zone influences the surface world in ways often unrecognized. The storage of carbon in abyssal sediments removes carbon from rapid cycling, preventing atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations from rising even more rapidly than they currently are. If this storage mechanism were to fail, atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations would increase dramatically, potentially causing catastrophic climate change. The health of the abyssal zone is therefore essential for maintaining the stability of Earth's climate system. Human activities at the surface have consequences for the abyss, and human activities in the abyss have consequences for the surface. Pollution generated far from the ocean eventually reaches even the deepest trenches. Overfishing at the surface reduces the abundance of organisms that would otherwise die and sink to the bottom, reducing food availability in the abyss. Deep-sea mining, if it proceeds, will resuspend sediments and disturb communities, potentially releasing carbon stored in sediments and microbes, with consequences for atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. Segment 16. Adaptations to darkness and pressure. The adaptations that abyssal creatures have evolved to survive in conditions of extreme darkness and pressure reveal the remarkable creativity of evolution. These adaptations have been refined over millions of years, creating solutions to environmental challenges that seem almost impossible to overcome. The evolution of eyes in deep-sea creatures presents a fascinating study in how organisms respond to their environment. Some creatures have retained eyes but have modified them dramatically. The eyes of some deep-sea fish are 10 to 100 times more sensitive to light than human eyes, allowing them to detect the faintest bioluminescent signals in darkness. The pupils of these eyes are enormous relative to body size, gathering maximum amounts of light. The retinas contain an overabundance of light-sensitive rod cells, cells specialized for detecting dim light at the expense of color-detecting cone cells. Some deep-sea creatures have evolved tubular eyes that point upward and can rotate to look forward when necessary. The tubular structure allows for greater magnification, enabling the creature to see small objects at considerable distances. This adaptation seems particularly suited for spotting bioluminescent prey or predators approaching from above. The loss of peripheral vision is apparently an acceptable trade-off for improved detection in the forward direction. Other creatures have taken the opposite evolutionary path, losing their eyes entirely or reducing them to non-functional vestiges. The cost of developing and maintaining functional eyes in perpetual darkness is high, and for creatures with extremely limited energy budgets, the energy saved by not developing eyes is valuable. These creatures rely entirely on other sensory systems, using chemoreceptors to detect chemical signals, lateral line organs to sense vibrations, and bioluminescent sensitivity in the skin rather than eyes. The development of specialized photoreceptive proteins has allowed some creatures to detect specific wavelengths of light with remarkable precision. Some deep-sea creatures appear to have evolved the ability to distinguish between different colors of bioluminescent light, possibly allowing them to identify the species and reproductive status of other creatures from their light signals. This specificity of vision is achieved through different versions of the light-sensitive protein rhodopsin, each with slightly different chemical structures that allow them to absorb different wavelengths of light. The tolerance of abyssal creatures to extreme pressure represents one of the most remarkable adaptations in all of biology. How do creatures survive at pressures of hundreds of atmospheres, pressures that would instantly crush an unprotected human to a pulp? The answer lies in multiple levels of adaptation, from the molecular to the organismal. At the molecular level, the proteins and membranes of abyssal creatures are structured to remain stable under extreme pressure. The pressure-sensitive proteins of surface creatures may unfold or change shape under the pressures found in the abyss, causing the creatures to malfunction. The proteins of abyssal creatures are more resistant to pressure-induced unfolding, maintaining their proper shapes even at extreme pressures. The amino acid sequences of these proteins have been shaped by evolution to create structures that resist pressure deformation. The lipid membranes that surround cells have also evolved in abyssal creatures to remain flexible and functional under extreme pressure. The membranes of surface cells can become too rigid to function properly under extreme pressure, while those of abyssal creatures maintain appropriate fluidity despite the crushing weight of the water above. The types of lipids incorporated into membranes and their proportions differ between surface and deep-sea creatures, reflecting this adaptation to different pressures. The body structures of abyssal creatures show numerous adaptations that reflect their existence under extreme pressure. Many abyssal creatures have soft bodies with minimal skeletal structures, having lost the rigid bone and cartilage that would create weak points where pressure could cause damage. The fluid-filled bodies of these creatures, with internal pressures matching the external environment, experience no net pressure differential across their tissues. A creature filled with fluid at the same pressure as its environment will not be crushed, no matter how extreme that pressure becomes. The nervous systems of abyssal creatures maintain function despite extreme pressure and cold, using chemical and electrical signals that propagate through nerves and across synapses, despite environmental conditions that would disrupt these processes in surface creatures. The neurotransmitters, the chemicals that allow neurons to communicate with each other, are produced and function efficiently at the temperatures and pressures of the abyss. The ion channels that create electrical signals in neurons are structured to operate in these extreme conditions. The metabolic processes of abyssal creatures have evolved to function at temperatures near freezing, where chemical reactions proceed very slowly. The enzymes that catalyze the chemical reactions necessary for life are structured to work efficiently at low temperatures. The rates of metabolic processes are much slower in abyssal creatures than in surface creatures, reflecting the temperature dependence of chemical reactions. This slow metabolism, while reducing the rate at which creatures can grow and reproduce, also reduces the rate at which they must consume food, allowing them to survive in the food-poor environment. The reproductive systems of abyssal creatures reflect the challenges of reproducing in the vast, sparsely populated abyss. Some creatures produce enormous numbers of gametes through broadcast spawning, creating clouds of eggs and sperm in the water. While most of these gametes will not result in successful reproduction, some fraction will encounter compatible partners and develop into new organisms. The vast numbers compensate for the extreme dilution and low probability of success. The sensory systems of abyssal creatures extend far beyond vision to include chemical, mechanical, and even electrical sensing. The chemoreceptors of abyssal creatures are often remarkably sensitive, capable of detecting chemical signals at concentrations of just a few molecules per liter of water. These sensory capabilities allow creatures to locate food, mates, and shelter in the darkness. Some creatures possess sophisticated organs dedicated to chemical sensing, creating images of their chemical environment the way surface creatures create visual images. Segment 17. The extraordinary biodiversity of deep-sea life. The astonishing diversity of creatures found in the Abyssal Zone continues to surprise and delight biologists. Each new expedition reveals species never before seen by science, each adapted to a specific niche in this complex ecosystem. The process of discovering and cataloging this biodiversity represents one of the great scientific endeavors of our time. The Abyssal Zone hosts representatives from virtually every major group of animals, from simple sponges to complex cephalopods. The variety of body plans, sensory systems, and feeding strategies reflects the diverse ways that evolution has discovered to exploit the resources available in the abyss. Some of the most common abyssal creatures are amphipods and isopods, small crustaceans that scavenge across the abyssal plain in vast numbers. A single square meter of abyssal sediment may contain hundreds or thousands of these creatures, all competing for the scarce food resources. The fish fauna of the abyss is particularly diverse, with thousands of species inhabiting these depths. These fish range in size from tiny organisms just a few millimeters long to larger predators reaching lengths of meters. Many abyssal fish are small and have unusual body plans that seem strange to those familiar only with surface fish. Some possess enormous mouths relative to body size, some have unusual pigmentations or structural features, and some exhibit remarkable bioluminescence. Echinoderms, the group that includes starfish and sea urchins on the surface, are particularly abundant and diverse in the abyss. Sea cucumbers crawl across the bottom, consuming organic material settled from above. Some sea cucumbers are nearly transparent, while others are brilliantly colored. The diversity of sea cucumber forms is remarkable, ranging from creatures that look like moving cucumbers to those that appear more like sea stars with elongated arms. Cephalopods, the group including octopuses, squid and cuttlefish, are represented in the abyss by species that exhibit remarkable intelligence and behavior. Some deep-sea octopuses have been observed exhibiting problem-solving abilities and hunting strategies of surprising sophistication. The giant squid, one of the largest invertebrates on Earth, inhabits the deep ocean, reaching sizes that allow them to hunt large fish and even engage in confrontations with sperm whales. The abundance and diversity of microbes in the abyss vastly exceeds that of all larger creatures combined. Bacteria and archaea fill every available niche, consuming organic material, producing energy through chemosynthesis, and engaging in complex metabolic processes. The genetic diversity of abyssal microbes appears to be enormous, with each sample of abyssal sediment containing thousands of microbial species, many previously unknown to science. The discovery of archaea in the abyss expanded the known diversity of life itself. Archaea were recognized as a distinct domain of life only in recent decades, previously thought to be bacteria. The discovery of archaea in the deep ocean revealed that these ancient organisms, which had been known primarily from extreme environments like hot springs, were actually abundant in the deep ocean as well. Some scientists believe that archaea may be more abundant in the abyss than bacteria, though the relative abundances remain incompletely characterized. The microorganisms of the abyss have evolved metabolic strategies unlike those found in surface organisms. Some archaea engage in chemosynthesis using energy from inorganic chemicals. Others, called ammonia oxidizers, extract energy from ammonia, converting it to nitrate, and using the energy released in this conversion to power their life processes. Still others engage in sulfate reduction or methane production, using entirely different chemical pathways to extract energy from their environment. The viruses of the abyss represent another category of biological diversity that remains largely unexplored. Viruses are incredibly abundant, outnumbering bacteria and archaea by several-fold in most environments. The diversity of viruses in the abyss appears to be enormous, with new viral types constantly being discovered. Viruses play crucial roles in abyssal food webs, infecting and lysing cells, thus releasing organic material and recycling nutrients. The genomic sequences of abyssal organisms have revealed the existence of genes unlike any found in previously studied organisms. These novel genes produce proteins with functions previously unknown to science. The mining of abyssal genomes has already led to the discovery of enzymes used in biotechnology and medical applications, and further discoveries are likely. The genetic diversity of the abyss represents a vast library of biological solutions to the challenge of surviving in extreme environments. The distribution patterns of abyssal organisms reveal fascinating biogeographic patterns. Some species are found throughout the global ocean, while others are restricted to specific regions. These patterns reflect the geology of the ocean basins, the circulation patterns of ocean currents, and the evolutionary history of the species themselves. Understanding these patterns requires integrating knowledge from biology, oceanography, and geology. The concept of species in the abyss is complicated by the difficulty of collecting and studying living organisms from extreme depths. Many abyssal creatures have been described from preserved specimens collected by submersibles or dredges, allowing detailed anatomical study but limited information about behavior or ecology. New genetic techniques are allowing scientists to identify species based on DNA sequences, revealing that what was previously thought to be a single species may actually be multiple closely related species with different ecological roles. Segment 18: Carbon cycling and the climate regulation role of the abyss. The role of the abyssal zone in storing and cycling carbon has become increasingly recognized as crucial to understanding Earth's climate system and predicting how the climate will respond to future changes. The vast quantities of carbon stored in abyssal sediments and water represent a vital component of Earth's climate regulation system. The journey of a carbon atom from the atmosphere to the abyss can follow multiple pathways, each taking different timescales and leaving different footprints in the geological record. Some carbon atoms are incorporated into phytoplankton in surface waters, providing the building blocks for organic molecules. When these phytoplankton die, the carbon is released back to the water, where it either continues to circulate or is consumed by zooplankton and higher trophic levels. Eventually, some of this carbon sinks to the abyss as part of marine snow or larger detritus. The biological pump, the process by which organic carbon is transported from the surface to the abyss, operates continuously throughout the global ocean. The efficiency of this pump varies from region to region and from season to season, but it represents a crucial mechanism for removing carbon from the surface waters and transporting it to the deep. In regions of high productivity and rapid sinking, large quantities of carbon can be transported to depth. In regions of low productivity or slow sinking, less carbon reaches the abyss. As organic material sinks through the water column, it is consumed by creatures at various depths. In the epipelagic zone, where light penetrates, zooplankton graze on phytoplankton and small fish consume zooplankton. In the mesopelagic zone, a diverse assemblage of creatures consumes the remaining organic material. By the time what reaches the abyss, much of the original carbon has been consumed and converted to metabolic byproducts. What arrives at the bottom represents a small fraction of what left the surface. The carbon that reaches the abyss is either consumed by abyssal creatures, decomposed by microbes, or incorporated into sediments. The carbon consumed by creatures is eventually respired, returning to the water as carbon dioxide. Carbon decomposed by microbes is similarly respired and released. Carbon incorporated into sediments may persist for millions of years, representing long-term storage. The proportion of carbon that follows each pathway influences the rate at which carbon cycles through the abyss and the rate at which it returns to the atmosphere. Abyssal sediments represent the largest carbon reservoir in the ocean, storing more carbon than the entire atmosphere contains. The carbon locked away in these sediments has accumulated over millions of years and represents past productivity of the ocean, past climate conditions, and the evolutionary history of the organisms that created the sediments. The release of even a small fraction of this stored carbon would have significant effects on atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations and global climate. The calcium carbonate cycle in the abyss represents another crucial mechanism for carbon storage. The shells and skeletons of countless organisms are composed of calcium carbonate. When these organisms die and sink, their calcium carbonate shells initially accumulate at the bottom. However, below the calcium carbonate compensation depth, these shells dissolve, releasing the carbon dioxide that was incorporated when the shells were formed. The carbon is released back to the water as dissolved carbon dioxide, continuing its journey through the ocean. The dissolution of calcium carbonate in response to increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations and declining ocean pH represents a concerning feedback loop. As the ocean becomes more acidic, more calcium carbonate dissolves, releasing additional carbon dioxide that further increases atmospheric concentrations. This positive feedback loop could amplify climate change, making it more severe than it would be in the absence of carbonate dissolution. The microbial community of the abyss plays crucial roles in carbon cycling. Some microbes decompose organic material, breaking down complex organic molecules into simpler compounds. Others engage in various forms of chemosynthesis, extracting energy from inorganic compounds while simultaneously incorporating carbon dioxide into organic molecules. Still others produce methane, transporting carbon between different chemical states and potentially influencing the rate at which carbon cycles between the abyss and the atmosphere. The long-term carbon cycle operates on timescales of hundreds of millions of years, far longer than human lifespans. Sediments incorporated into the abyss may eventually be subducted and melted in the mantle, releasing their carbon as carbon dioxide gas that escapes to the atmosphere through volcanic activity. This represents the ultimate fate of most abyssal sediments and the mechanism by which carbon initially removed to the abyss eventually returns to the atmosphere on geological timescales. The response of the abyssal carbon cycle to climate change remains incompletely understood. As ocean temperatures rise and oxygen levels decline, the rates at which organic material decomposes may change. As water becomes more acidic, the dissolution of calcium carbonate may increase. As ocean circulation patterns shift, the transport of carbon to the abyss may be altered. All of these changes could have cascading effects on the rate at which carbon cycles through the abyss and the amount that is stored there. The protection and preservation of the abyssal carbon cycling system has become recognized as important for mitigating climate change. The disruption of abyssal ecosystems through mining, pollution, or overfishing could impair the capacity of the abyss to store carbon and could release stored carbon back to the atmosphere. Conversely, the restoration and protection of abyssal ecosystems could enhance the capacity of the abyss to absorb and store carbon from the atmosphere, potentially helping to offset some of the carbon dioxide released by human activities. Segment 19. Voices from the Deep, specific creatures and their remarkable adaptations. To truly appreciate the diversity of abyssal life, it helps to consider specific creatures and the particular adaptations they have evolved. These individual stories illustrate the remarkable ways that evolution has solved the problems posed by abyssal existence. The anglerfish represents one of the most iconic deep-sea creatures, famous for its extreme sexual dimorphism and its bioluminescent lure. Female anglerfish are relatively large, reaching lengths of 1 meter or more, and possess enormous mouths with teeth pointing backward to prevent prey from escaping. The males are tiny, sometimes less than 1/10 the size of females, and in some species, the males attach themselves permanently to females, literally fusing with them and losing their independence. This extreme adaptation reflects the difficulty of locating a mate in the sparsely populated abyss. The bioluminescent lure of anglerfish dangles from a modified fin ray, containing light-producing bacteria in a specialized structure called a photophore. The female uses this lure to attract prey, waving it in the darkness to entice curious fish to approach. Once prey comes within range, the anglerfish's enormous mouth and powerful jaws allow it to capture prey nearly as large as itself. The energy invested in producing bioluminescence and growing and maintaining the lure is repaid many times over by the successful capture of prey. The six-gill shark represents the abyss's apex predators, large sharks that patrol the deep waters hunting fish and squid. These sharks, reaching lengths of 5 meters or more, are evolutionarily ancient, their lineage extending back hundreds of millions of years. The presence of these apex predators in the abyss suggests that the ecosystem supports substantial enough food webs to sustain large predators, despite the apparent scarcity of food. The giant squid, one of the most famous deep-sea creatures, exemplifies the remarkable sizes that some abyssal creatures attain. These enormous cephalopods, reaching lengths of up to 20 meters or more, hunt fish and other squid in the darkness. Their enormous eyes, the largest of any animal on Earth, suggest visual hunting in environments where even faint light is precious. The sperm whales that hunt giant squid in the abyss represent connections between surface and deep ecosystems, as these whales must return to the surface to breathe. The colossal squid, even larger than the giant squid in mass, represents the extreme end of abyssal size. These creatures, which live in the waters around Antarctica, are equipped with rotating hooks and suckers that allow them to grip and manipulate prey. The capture of a living colossal squid has never been accomplished, making our knowledge of these creatures fragmentary and incomplete. The existence of such enormous creatures in the abyss raises questions about how they find sufficient food and what role they play in abyssal food webs. The barrelé fish possesses a completely transparent head with tubular eyes that can rotate upward to look directly above the fish. This remarkable adaptation allows the creature to search for silhouettes of prey while the transparent head remains invisible to prey looking downward. The contrast between the transparent head and the opaque body below serves a camouflage function, making the fish difficult to detect. The Dumbo octopus represents a group of deep-dwelling cephalopods that inhabit the abyssal plains. These creatures, named for their ear-like fins that resemble the elephant Dumbo, move slowly across the bottom, hunting small crustaceans and other invertebrates. Some Dumbo octopuses have been observed and filmed by submersibles at great depths, providing some of the most memorable images of deep-sea life. The brittle stars, relatives of starfish with elongated, flexible arms, are extremely abundant in the abyss, with thousands of individuals sometimes found in a single square meter of sediment. These creatures crawl slowly across the bottom, feeding on organic material. Some species appear to have evolved the ability to detach their arms when threatened, leaving behind a writhing arm that may distract a predator while the creature escapes. The sea pigs, specialized sea cucumbers, are among the most abundant megafauna on abyssal plains, with videos from submersibles often showing multiple individuals within a single frame. These creatures crawl across the sediment surface, feeding on organic material. Some species appear to undergo mass migrations, moving across the abyssal plain in response to seasonal changes in food availability. A single whale fall can attract large aggregations of sea pigs, all competing for access to the abundant food. The deep-sea corals represent some of the longest-lived organisms on Earth, with some individuals potentially exceeding thousands of years of age. These corals grow extremely slowly, sometimes adding just a few millimeters to their height per year. The vulnerability of these ancient organisms to disturbance and the extremely slow rate of recovery from damage make the protection of coral habitats particularly important. Segment 20. The Silent Depths and Human Responsibility. As we contemplate the abyss, with all its mystery and wonder, we must also consider the human role in shaping the future of this realm. For millions of years, the abyss existed largely untouched by human activity, isolated by distance and technology from human influence. In recent decades, this isolation has eroded, and humans have begun to exert significant impacts on abyssal ecosystems. The profound isolation of the abyss from human activity, while still considerable, is being reduced by multiple human impacts. Pollution from the surface, once thought to be unable to penetrate to such depths, has been discovered in the deepest trenches. Plastic particles have been found in abyssal sediments and in the bodies of deep-sea creatures. Persistent organic pollutants, chemicals banned at the surface but not yet degraded, have accumulated in the tissues of abyssal organisms. The chemical impact of human civilization has reached even to the most remote regions of our planet. Deep-sea fishing has expanded into previously unfished regions, with trawlers dragging nets across abyssal plains and seamounts, capturing creatures for consumption or bycatch. This fishing represents a major disturbance to abyssal communities, removing organisms and disturbing sediments. The slow growth rates and reproduction rates of deep-sea creatures make populations particularly vulnerable to overfishing, with some populations showing signs of depletion after only a few years of intensive fishing. Deep-sea mining represents a potential new and more extensive human impact on abyssal ecosystems. The proposal to mine mineral-rich deposits from the seafloor, including polymetallic nodules on abyssal plains and sulfide deposits near hydrothermal vents, would cause massive disturbance to abyssal communities. The removal of nodules and the resuspension of sediments would kill organisms and disturb habitats. The environmental impacts would extend far beyond the immediate mining area, with sediment plumes potentially affecting regions hundreds of kilometers away. The potential release of sequestered carbon from disturbed abyssal sediments and microbes represents a concern that has received less attention than it deserves. The sediments and microbial communities of the abyss store vast quantities of carbon that has been removed from rapid cycling. If abyssal ecosystems are disrupted, some of this carbon could be released back to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide, potentially amplifying climate change. This represents an indirect but potentially severe consequence of deep-sea mining or other large-scale abyssal disturbances. The responsibility of humanity toward the abyss is a question that will become increasingly important as technology makes further exploitation possible. Do we have an obligation to protect abyssal ecosystems for their own sake, recognizing the intrinsic value of life and the right of other creatures to exist? Do we have an obligation based on enlightened self-interest, recognizing that the abyss provides services crucial to human survival and well-being? Or do we have only an obligation to balance human economic interests against environmental preservation, extracting resources from the abyss while accepting environmental costs? The establishment of marine protected areas in the abyss represents one approach to preserving abyssal ecosystems while allowing human use of the ocean. These protected areas would prohibit or restrict destructive activities like mining and allow primarily scientific research and non-extractive activities. The implementation of such protections on a global scale faces significant challenges, including questions of international governance and enforcement. The role of science in informing policy about deep-sea conservation cannot be overstated. As our knowledge of abyssal ecosystems increases, the scientific case for protection becomes stronger. We are beginning to understand the complexity, diversity, and importance of abyssal ecosystems in sufficient detail to make informed decisions about how they should be managed. The responsibility of scientists is to communicate this knowledge clearly and effectively to policymakers and the public. The moral dimensions of human interactions with the abyss extend beyond purely practical considerations. The creatures of the abyss, having evolved in isolation from humans for millions of years, have no defenses against human impact and no role in creating the conditions that now threaten them. Many scientists and philosophers believe that we have a moral obligation to protect organisms and ecosystems from destruction caused by human activities, particularly when the destruction serves only to increase the wealth of already wealthy humans. The sustainable use of abyssal resources, if such use is to occur, requires careful management and strict environmental standards. The carrying capacity of abyssal ecosystems for human exploitation is unknown and possibly quite low. The precautionary principle suggests that in situations of deep uncertainty, we should err on the side of caution, avoiding actions that might cause irreversible harm. Applied to the abyss, this principle suggests that large-scale exploitation should be delayed pending more complete understanding of ecosystem consequences. The future of the abyss will be determined by decisions made in the coming years and decades. As technology advances and economic pressures increase, the temptation to exploit abyssal resources will grow stronger. The protection of abyssal ecosystems will require sustained effort, political will, and international cooperation. The knowledge of the abyss that we have accumulated and the continued expansion of that knowledge through scientific research will be crucial for making informed decisions about how to manage human interactions with this vast and remarkable realm. Segment 21. Contemplation in the darkness, a meditation on the abyss. As we approach the conclusion of our long drift through the Abyssal Zone, it is appropriate to pause and reflect on what we have learned and what the abyss means to us as inhabitants of Earth. The abyss represents a world almost entirely unknown to human experience. The vast majority of humans will never see the abyss, never witness the darkness and pressure and cold that characterize this realm. Our knowledge of the abyss is mediated through technology, through cameras and instruments operated from a distance. We see images captured by submersibles, read descriptions written by scientists, study data collected by autonomous vehicles. Yet for all our technological mediation, the abyss remains profoundly alien, profoundly other. The creatures of the abyss have developed in isolation from human eyes for millions of years. They have no concept of human existence, no awareness of the surface world. Their entire universe is one of darkness and pressure and cold. The sensory world of an abyssal creature is entirely different from our own. Where we see colors and light, they perceive only darkness and bioluminescence. Where we feel wind and air pressure, they feel only the crushing weight of water. Where we experience rapid changes of temperature and season, they experience only unchanging cold. Yet despite these profound differences, the creatures of the abyss are not fundamentally different from us. They are organisms like ourselves, composed of cells organized into tissues and organs, powered by the metabolism of organic compounds, striving to survive and reproduce. The biochemistry that powers abyssal creatures, while adapted to extreme conditions, is based on the same fundamental chemical principles that power all life on Earth. We share common ancestors with these creatures, ancestors that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. In this sense, we are related to even the strangest and most alien-seeming creatures of the abyss. The abyss teaches us about the limits of life and the creative power of evolution. We learn that life is far more resilient and creative than our surface-dwelling experience might suggest. Creatures can survive and thrive in conditions that seem utterly hostile to existence. Energy can be obtained through pathways other than photosynthesis. Communities can be sustained independently of the sun's energy. The boundaries of what is possible for life are much broader than we might have imagined. The abyss also teaches us about humility. For millions of years, the abyss existed without any knowledge that humans existed anywhere in the universe. Life flourished in these depths, evolved into countless forms, died and was born again in endless cycles, all without the slightest awareness of humans. This serves as a reminder that humans are but one part of the vastly larger tapestry of life on Earth. Our existence, while remarkable, is not the center around which all else revolves. Other creatures have their own lives, their own struggles, their own value. The beauty of the abyss, though it exists in darkness inaccessible to our eyes, is real and profound. The intricate adaptations of creatures, the delicate balance of ecosystems, the vast interconnections between all parts of the system all constitute a beauty that equals or exceeds the beauty of the surface world. The fact that we cannot see this beauty with our own eyes does not diminish its reality or its value. The abyss represents one of the great achievements of evolution, a complete ecosystem supported by energy sources that do not depend on the sun, populated by creatures that have solved the problems of surviving in the most extreme conditions. This represents not just biological success, but a kind of triumph of creativity and adaptation. Each creature in the abyss is a solution to a problem, a testament to millions of years of selection and refinement. The study of the abyss has shown us that we do not understand our own planet as well as we might have believed. Even as humans have mapped the continents and explored the polar regions, even as we have traveled to space and glimpsed other worlds, the abyss has remained largely mysterious. The recognition of how much we do not know about our own planet is humbling. It suggests that careful study and respectful appreciation for the unknown should characterize our approach to the world around us. The abyss connects us to the deep past and the distant future. The fossil records locked in abyssal sediments tell us about ancient oceans and extinct creatures. The knowledge we gain from studying abyssal organisms informs us about how life might persist on other worlds, how we might find life on moons of Jupiter or Saturn if we ever journey there. The abyss is both a mirror reflecting our own history and a window into possibilities we have yet to imagine. As we conclude our journey through the abyss, let us carry with us the sense of wonder and respect that this realm inspires. Let us recognize the value and the beauty of the creatures that inhabit it. Let us consider our responsibility toward this ecosystem that has existed for millions of years and has done nothing to deserve the disruption that humans now bring. Let us make choices that preserve and protect rather than exploit and destroy. The abyss will continue long after we are gone. If we are wise, it will continue to thrive, populated by creatures we have never seen, maintaining the balance of life in the depths as it has for millions of years. This is not a journey we can control or direct, but rather a realm we can choose to respect and preserve. In doing so, we honor not just the creatures of the abyss, but the principles of wisdom and responsibility that should guide our interaction with all of life on Earth. Segment 22. The Eternal Slow Drift. A Final Meditation. As our long journey through the Abyssal Zone draws toward its conclusion, we drift slowly through the darkness, allowing our minds to rest in the contemplation of this vast and mysterious realm. Imagine yourself floating in the darkness, suspended in water so cold it approaches freezing, surrounded by pressure so intense it would crush your body instantly. Around you in the darkness, creatures move with purpose and grace, pursuing lives adapted to conditions utterly foreign to any experience you have ever known. They hunt, they feed, they reproduce, they die, all without sound or haste, all in the slow motion, dictated by cold and pressure and the scarcity of food. The silence of the abyss is profound and complete. No waves break on distant shores. No wind howls through caverns. No birds sing or insects chirp. The only sounds are the faint movements of creatures, the occasional rumble from within the earth, the slow whisper of currents moving through the water. This silence extends not just through space, but through time. Days and weeks pass with no variation, no seasonal change, no difference between tomorrow and today. Time itself seems different in the abyss, moving not in the quick beats of surface life, but in the slow pulse of deep processes taking place on geological timescales. Yet within this apparent silence and stillness, profound processes are occurring. Currents move slowly but relentlessly through the water, carrying heat and nutrients from one region to another. Chemical reactions proceed at rates measured in years or decades for processes that would take minutes at the surface. Creatures grow imperceptibly from one year to the next, but growing nonetheless, adding to their mass with patient persistence. Sediments accumulate grain by grain, eventually forming layers that record the history of the ocean and the earth. The patience of the abyss is extraordinary. Nothing happens quickly. The transformation of the abyss proceeds at rates so slow they seem almost motionless when viewed on human timescales. Yet when viewed across the span of millions of years, the changes are dramatic and profound. Mountains rise and erode, species come into being and pass into extinction. Entire ecosystems appear and disappear. The abyss participates in this grand transformation, neither hastening nor resisting, simply continuing its slow work of processing the materials and energy that flow through it. The abyss teaches us to appreciate timescales far longer than those that normally concern us. Most human concerns operate on timescales of years or decades. Politics changes on timescales of months or years. Fashion and entertainment cycle on timescales of seasons or years. Even the significant historical events that shape societies occur on timescales of decades or centuries. Yet the abyss operates on timescales of thousands and millions of years. A water molecule entering the abyss will not return to the surface for 1,000 years. A species evolving in the abyss takes millions of years to reach its current form. The carbon stored in abyssal sediments will remain there for tens of millions of years. This long timescale perspective provides a valuable corrective to the anxieties and urgencies that often dominate human consciousness. Many of the concerns that seem so pressing and immediate in human life would be utterly invisible if viewed across a geological timescale. Yet some concerns, particularly those related to climate change and the preservation of life, operate on timescales that do matter when viewed in geological terms. The release of carbon dioxide from human activities, if continued, would create changes in climate and ocean chemistry more rapid than any that have occurred in millions of years. The disruption of ecosystems would result in the permanent loss of species and ecosystems that took millions of years to develop. The abyss, for all its permanence and stability, is vulnerable to disruption on timescales that are rapid by geological standards. The creatures of the abyss have evolved in an environment of extraordinary stability. Rapid changes, even if modest in absolute terms, can exceed the adaptive capacity of creatures that have never experienced such change. The challenge facing us is to maintain the abyss as a realm of stability and slow change, allowing it to continue its ancient work of supporting life in the depths. As we prepare to leave our journey through the abyss and return to the surface world, let us carry with us the lessons this realm has taught. Let us remember the profound beauty of this largely unseen world and the creatures that inhabit it. Let us reflect on the connections between surface and deep, between present and past, between our actions and their consequences. Let us consider our responsibility to preserve and protect this realm for future generations. The abyss will continue long after we have gone, drifting in its darkness, populated by creatures we will never meet, maintaining the slow cycles of life and chemistry that sustain our entire planet. The knowledge we gain from studying the abyss enriches our understanding of life, of Earth, and of our own place in the universe. As we emerge from our contemplation and return to the surface world, we do so with greater appreciation for the complexity and beauty of the realm beneath the waves, and with deeper commitment to its preservation.